Tonight on The John Ankerberg Show, you'll hear two professors debate the question, does Christianity rest on fact or fantasy? John's first guest, Dr. John Gerstner. He received his Ph.D. from Harvard University. From 1950 to 1980, Dr. Gerstner was professor of church history at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary and is currently visiting professor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and professor at large for the Ligonier Valley Study Center. He has authored more than 30 major theological articles and has written 18 books. He has also been a contributing editor of Christianity Today. John's second guest, Dr. R.C. Sproul, received his doctorate from the Free University of Amsterdam. He is currently the adjunct professor of systematic theology and apologetics at the Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, and president of Ligonier Valley Study Center. Dr. Sproul has written 10 books and numerous theological articles. And now, to begin our debate, would you welcome our host, John Ankerberg.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome tonight. Welcome. Gentlemen, we're so happy to have you here tonight, Dr. Gerstner and Dr. Sproul. And Dr. Sproul, we are very happy that you would enunciate for us many of the questions that people that are searching for God, the questions that they have. And Dr. Gerstner, we're glad that you would be willing to answer those questions or attempt to answer those to the best of your ability, which is tremendous. And let's not beat around the bush too much. Dr. Sproul, I'd like you to start off with some of the questions that many of us would ask about belief in God.
Dr. Gerstner is a professional theologian and a church historian. You're as aware as most people are that in this day and age, the consensus is almost total that if one is going to believe in God, he must do it as an act of faith rather than on a basis of rational evidence. But you, I understand, are taking an older position, trying to argue that reason compels the verdict that there does exist a personal God. Is that your position?
That is true, Dr. Sproul. I don't think God appreciates the worship of fools, and when a person actually adores him or professes to believe in him simply because he wants to believe in him without any evidence, I don't believe that God's flattered by that.
All right, you're saying then that the mind has to come into play here and that there is cogent reason for a person in this day and age to believe in God. And I'd like to just get at it right away, Dr. Gerstner, go right for the jugular if I might, and that is this. If I had to ask you, push you to the wall and say, what is the one most compelling argument for the existence of God that you can think of, what would you say?
Oh, without doubt, Dr. Sproul, the most compelling argument for the existence of God, in my opinion, is the fact that you cannot not think God.
Wait a minute, that's a double negative. That's hard for an American to take
right.
here.
That's right.
You cannot not think that there is a God.
You must think of God.
That is intellectually necessary to think of God as existing. Is this the old Anselmic ontological argument coming at me?
That's part of it.
Can you simplify it a little bit for us?
Well, I'd say when you think about being, which everybody does, whether he's a professional philosopher or not, you think of the being we know, it's constantly coming into new shapes and forms, and it screams for an existence. So there has to be a being which doesn't change, from which all being which does change comes. So that being has to be eternal. It has to be infinite. And obviously, that's what we mean by God. So I say you can't think about being without thinking about God.
Let me see if I got it now. You're saying to me now that if anything exists now has being, as you say. You like that word being.
Amen.
All right, you like the word being. Something exists now that we have to account for its being, its power to exist.
Right. Exactly.
And you're saying that there has to be some eternal power to bring this temporal power of being into existence. Have I got it? I don't want to distort it.
Right.
All right, now, Dr. Gerstner, you're certainly aware of the fact that there are all kinds of alternate theories set forth before us today that say that we do not have to have an eternal, self-existent being to account for temporal being, that we have a possibility of an eternal world, for example. What would you say to that?
Well, the eternal world, I don't mind that, you see. It's when people say there's an option to the eternal being. Now, an eternal world would have to be the source of intelligence, it'd have to be the source of purpose, it would have to be the source of morality, and so on. And that eternal world, being the source of all things, is what we usually spell G-O-D.
In other words, we're just transferring the traditional attributes of God and giving it to the world. Is that what you're saying?
That's what
yeah,
they would be
but
doing.
they're saying no. That they're saying that it's matter itself that's eternal, Dr. Gerstner, and they make it. Even these scientists are making a distinction between matter and some spiritual being that I presume you mean when you say about G-O-D. You're talking about a spiritual being.
Exactly.
And yet some are arguing that matter itself has eternal power.
Yes, I have a way of saying that the trouble with matter is that it has a mater or a mother. That is, a matter explains nothing. It's just undifferentiated being. As soon as you talk about that entity, whichever it is, that's the source of all rationality and morality and purpose and everything, which matter alone, of course, doesn't do, you're talking about G-O-D.
Okay, I know a little bit about these things. I've heard the cosmological argument as it's stated many different ways, and what I hear you saying is that the bottom line simply is that if something exists now, something has to have the power of being to account for it. All right, let me surrender my critique at that point. Say, okay, I can agree with you that there has to be some suitable explanation. But why does that being, this is what I'm getting at with this matter thing, have to be of a personal sort, Dr. Gerstner? I mean, I'm certainly not going to be in communion and worship with cosmic dust or things like that. Why a personal God?
Well, because when you have morality, you have purpose, and you have intelligence, that adds up to a personal being.
But that's the point that we're getting at again and again and again. Men like B.F. Skinner are saying that we have to come of age and recognize the fact that those very ideas that you are saying are illusions. Personality, the self, morality. Aren't we living in a time where we've gone beyond that, that we are just simply a field of electrons or chemical responses to material activity, that there's no such thing as real morality? But you're one to insist that we do have that.
That reminds me, when you refer about Skinner referring that way and so on, of Pavlov performing his experiments with his dogs, and somebody watching it and passing out in fear, and somebody resuscitating her and saying to her, when the dogs start experimenting on Pavlov, that's when you have to be worried, not this other kind of situation. Skinner can say what he pleases, but you still have to account for intelligence and morality and purpose, and you don't do it by talking about matter or mere stimuli or responses to certain kinds of conditions.
Why not? Why can't we do it that way?
Because, as I say, we're immediately aware. You, for example, you're asking me a question right now, so it goes through your head that you ought to ask me a question. Because you have that idea in your mind, and the way by which you want to articulate it is in the form of a question, you come with a question. The question just doesn't emerge out of that statue I see in front of me. It's the product of a thinking brain articulating an idea to another, presumably, hopefully, thinking brain also.
Well, suppose, I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like that, I grant that, but suppose that's in fact the case.
Well, it's the fact that you say it's in fact the case. What you're doing is say, it's in fact the case that a person with an intelligence and a purpose, and incidentally a morality as well, sees fit to communicate to another person who's capable of thinking of purpose and morality and meaning and such things as that. If you're going to call that a thing, go ahead. But the usual way of talking about beings like that is persons.
Okay, we want to pick up on that, about a personal God, when we come right back.
Dr. Gerstner, I had you there at the break there about this question of personality, whether there really is such a thing as a person, and I don't want to get lost in that for a second. And what I heard you saying to me is that you can't have personality impersonally and that sort of thing. Okay, let me grant, for the sake of argument, that I am a person